What is happening, y'all? Welcome back to the show. Got a science video coming your way today. This one's been delayed for a really long time. I probably should have made this one a long time ago. But today we're talking about the bigger toys that are in Forged Alliance Forever. And if YouTube analytics are to be believed, most of the people that watch my show are dudes. And if there's one thing that is true about dudes, it's that as we grow up, we don't really grow up. We're still kids. Our toys just get bigger. And just like that, as your economy grows in Forged Alliance Forever, you don't really grow up, your toys just get bigger. And these are the toys that we rarely see in games, but love so much because of the death and destruction that they wreak on our foes, crushing their shields, obliterating their bases, and snuffing the small light that may still linger from their pitiful little opposition. That's right, we're talking about the Mavor, the Scathus, the Salvation, and the Yolana Os. So before we get into the numbers and comparisons, we'll start with an explanation of what these units do, just in case you don't know what these units are, because, there might be some brand new people that are watching this that have never built these units before, might not know what they do, might not know that they exist, but they do exist. They are terrifying. So let's start with the Mavor, potentially everybody's favorite and maybe the most iconic unit in Forged Alliance Forever that can arouse even the most heterosexual of Forged Alliance Forever players. The Mavor has nearly unlimited range, unless you're playing on like an 80 by 80 map, like the one on screen from SLI Fox, which is inspired by kind of the countries that are in Europe and the European continent. It also packs quite a punch with a damage amount of about 16,000. Regardless, this is enough damage to bring even the most heavily shielded bases crumbling to the ground. And I believe that this is many players' favorite unit for its imposing model, massive damage amount, and accuracy pinpoint to snipe a commander across the screen, standing as long as it is standing still. Now, our second one is the Yolana, also called the YOLO, because you only live once. Yes, that's right. I'm from that generation where we started abbreviating a bunch of really stupid things and has now led to the pathetic internet culture that we now have, where I can go to a party with a bunch of 18 and 19-year-olds and don't even know what they're actually saying. True story. True story. I looked at my friend and was like, are these people even speaking English? Like, I understand, but I also don't understand. But we started with the most expensive one, so let's go down to the least expensive game ender, the Yolana Os. All the other game enders are artillery based. This one breaks the mold by being a nuclear missile launcher. Main strengths here are its incredibly reduced loading times, and it requires 2 traditional anti-nukes to actually shoot its payload down. The other thing that's unique is it has a significantly increased damage and area of effect whenever compared to the standard missile launcher. Now, if I'm reading the data that's on the screen right now for you, it has roughly a 50% increased radius for full damage and a 50% increased radius for total area of effect. I'm not positive I'm reading that correctly, but I believe it is. I believe I'm reading that correctly. But I do know one thing, and that is bigger number means bigger number, which means bigger. And I don't math too good over here, so it just begs the question why I'm doing science videos in the first place. But anyway, moving on to the Scathus. This is the second most expensive game ender out there. Rapid fire artillery installation capable of throwing more artillery shells out in a short period of time than any other artillery unit out there at the cost of accuracy. This makes it really, really good at suppressing large bases and being able to annihilate them nearly instantly once the shields fail, if they have any. The last one is the Salvation, and we had to leave the Aeon for last because they are the least effective faction out there. They're garbage. But the Salvation is something of a mix between the Mavor and the Scathus. It has larger area of effect and fire rate than the Mavor, but not as high as the Scathus, making it a good happy medium between the two. But make no mistake, they can still tear through shields and focus fire with the best of the artillery units out there. So now, let's get into our primary test, because in order to compare these, we want to see kind of how they do at penetrating shields. That's going to be for the 3 artillery installations. We got something a little special for the Yolana Os, but for the 3 artillery installations, we want to see how well they can actually penetrate a shielded base. Because whenever you're actually building a game ender, odds are somebody else is building a game ender, or if you're building a game ender, it means that your team is at a significant economic disadvantage by having to throw that much economy into a game ender. So you've probably lost a lot of map control, and you're going to have to start killing bases really, really quickly whenever these things go up. So I set up a test with 14 different Tech 3 shields and 14 Tech 2 shields, kind of in a layered configuration in a grid. And we're going to measure how quickly it takes to get through the shields. For the Mavor, it took about 30 seconds for the shells to cross the map and about 50 seconds for them to bring the shields down, which is kind of how I'm measuring here. This takes out of the equation any accuracy considerations. So just looking for it to bring the shields down, and then it'll start doing damage after the fact, because realistically, once the shields are down, the next shot is going to hit a T3 power generator and then blow everything up anyway. Salvation shells are actually the first make contact at about 30 seconds, so no real difference here from the Mavor, but it seems to be a lot better at crushing shields, taking on average about 42 seconds to get through the same amount of shields as the Mavor. The Scathus is up last, and it actually comes in last with shells taking slightly longer at 32 seconds to reach the mark and 56 seconds to drop the shields. Props though, because once the shields failed, they failed in very spectacular fashion, and the damage was quite immediate, wiping out pretty much all the shields and all the buildings underneath nearly instantly. I should also note here that the Scathus has much higher firing randomness. That basically just means accuracy than the others. But I thought that the firing randomness would actually increase proportionally with the range that you're actually shooting it at. And it actually doesn't. It has the same firing randomness on a 10x10 that it would on a 20x20. So you're kind of in the same boat regardless of the map size if you build a Scathus as to how accurate it's going to be. Thought that might be a note. I was under that wrong impression, so figured some other people might be under that impression too. Now, the test for the YOLO has me kind of questioning my sanity here. I tried to do a video a long time ago on how much you had to assist one SMD to defend against the YOLO. And that video turned into something entirely different. I'll link it below if you're curious. But today we're going to see how many SMDs you actually need to defend against the YOLO instead of measuring how quickly it goes through shields, because it's going to go through shields instantly. So we're just going to line up a bunch of SMDs, like hundreds of them, and let them get to one counter nuke each, and we'll just start blasting the YOLO and see how deep we get into the lines before the first ones reload. And turns out the answer was 8. So you need 8 SMDs to defend against the Yolana Os reliably without any assistance from engineers. So did I need to build 300 SMDs to test this? No. Does it make the video more funny? Probably not, but like we said earlier, I don't math good. So lastly, we'll look at the numbers for what each of these units cost, and then we'll compare what they do, because they all have kind of their strengths and weaknesses from a offensive perspective. And then the last thing we'll go over is going to be the subjective part of the video, where we go into which is my favorite from a bang for the buck perspective. One thing to note, if you've made it this far in the video, you might have noticed that the Satellite and the Paragon are absent from this comparison. And that's mostly because I think they sit in a different class than the rest of these behemoths. We're not really measuring the overall game impact of these game enders. I'm trying to take like for like units as much as I can. I'll do an in-depth video on the Satellite at a later date, because I think that it probably deserves a video, even though Comrade Striker is going to, potentially have a fit if I do anything other than sing the highest praises for Satellite. So let's throw the stats on the screen just to show the difference in cost between these units, because they are different. It's easy to look at these units and just think, damn, they're expensive. But the cost can play a huge role in the results of how these units are actually going to perform in game. The other thing that I want to take a look at is how long it takes to actually build one of these units with a certain amount of mass. So I took about 300 mass, I think it was 289 mass, and then measured how long it takes to build each one of these units, because part of the game ender strategy is you need to have it up either before your team crumbles around you or before the other players get their game enders up. Plus, it was more fun to watch experimentals build for an hour instead of doing the math myself. And the results are that at about 300 mass income devoted entirely to our game ender, you can build a Yolana about 2 minutes faster than you can build a Mavor, and the Scathus and the Salvation sit in between with the numbers on the screen, which means that depending on how many anti-nukes your opponent has, you've got a little bit of a grace period with the Yolana, meaning that you can wipe a Mavor off the map before it is even finished. So if you're in that race, I'd rather be racing with a Yolana than racing with a Mavor. So now We'll talk about my subjective thoughts on these units, where I would rank them, because, you know, I gotta rank them because I gotta piss people off. So ranking is as follows. In first place, we have the Salvation for a couple primary reasons. Its performance on the shield test, as well as its overall lower mass cost than either the Mave or the Scathus, make it a pretty clear choice for me. It puts out a good bang for your buck and also is going to cost you fewer resources to actually build. It also has a much lower build cost requirements, meaning that you could rush it up a lot faster, assuming your teammates want to help out with the resource bottleneck. Now, if you're confused as to kind of what I'm talking about here, I'm going to put an example on the screen, and you can see that one Tech 3 engineer building a Salvation pulls about 65 mass per second, while a Tech 3 engineer building a Mavor only pulls about 24 mass per second to build a Mavor. So what that means is you need more engineers building the Mavor to be able to build it at the same rate as you would a Salvation, assuming you have unlimited resources at your disposal. That also means that you don't have to have as many engineers dedicated to building a Salvation, and if your allies, if you happen to have good allies, which, you know, maybe you do, maybe you don't, it's a coin toss, helping you build the Salvation and funneling you resources, then you're going to be able to get that up a lot faster than an opponent's Mavor. Now, the second place goes to the Mavor. The accuracy it displays and the punch it throws makes it a pretty obvious choice in my mind for second place here. While it is the most expensive unit, you do gain a lot of damage or accuracy and focus damage for that extra cost that you're laying out. So I believe that second place here goes to the Mavor. I believe it is deserving of this. Third goes to the Scathus. I don't think it does as good of a job providing focus damage, which in the late game, if you're trying to get through lots of shields, is, I think, really, really important. The spread damage on the Scathus makes it a little bit easier to deal with shield micro, which we'll talk about a little bit later, around defending actually against the Scathus. But even still, it's very difficult to defend against. And then the last place is going to be the Yolana. And this doesn't mean that the Yolana is bad by any means. It's a really, really powerful unit. And the only reason why it is in last is because it is possible for an average Joe like myself to defend against the Yolana by building a strategic missile defense. This doesn't mean that you have to do shield micro, which is, as I understand it, I've never done this, so I'm just going off of what I've seen, is turning your shields off and on manually to abuse the recharge time. You don't have to do assistance with either engineers or engineering stations to make sure that your shields don't fail. And you also don't have to build hovering air transports to defend against the Yolana. So by and large, it's just easier to defend against the Yolana than it is against the other three, which means that it has to go into fourth place in my mind. There is a huge advantage that the Yolana has as far as being almost like a rapid fire nuclear point defense. And I'll throw an example of that on screen. And I think that nearly elevates it in my mind up to a higher position, but it's just difficult for me to justify giving the Yolana more whenever it can be defended against with 8 strategic missile defenses. And I know I'm saying that that's like, I'm saying that like it's easy to just build 8 SMDs to defend against the YOLO, but the fact that it's possible and that you don't have to do a bunch of assistance and engineering micro and shield micro and hovering air transports to catch incoming shells means that it's got to go in last place for me. So that's all. That's kind of what I think about, but I'm curious as always to know what y'all think. So drop it in the comments below. I usually get lots of really, really good insights. So if you don't agree with me, or if you do agree with me and you want to see somebody else's point of view, then head down to the comments and let me know what you think, or read what other people think. But thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.